Austin, Texas, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Well, Austin, thank you very much for sending this young man to the United States Congress. I know Greg well enough to know that you're looking at a future leader of the progressive movement in the United States of America and in Congress. And I am really delighted and proud. And let me congratulate all of those who have stood up, fought back, and created new unions here in Texas. Congratulations. And the good news is that all over this country, we are now seeing an unprecedented level of union organizing. We haven't seen this for decades. And the reason for that is pretty clear. People are sick and tired of working 40 or 50 hours a week and falling further and further behind while the billionaires are making out like bandits. So let me just take a minute or two to tell you where I think we are as a nation. On one hand, we have an economy where working people are falling further and further behind. We have 60, people don't talk about this much. Today in America, if you can believe it, the wealthiest country on earth, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. And you all know what living paycheck to paycheck is about. I grew up in a family, lived paycheck to paycheck. Means you work hard, and at the end of the week, you got nothing, or maybe you're a little bit worse off. You can't afford rent. You can't afford health care. You can't afford prescription drugs. You can't afford child care. You can't afford to put away a few bucks to send your kid to college. That's paycheck to paycheck. Right now in America, we got 600,000 people who are homeless. We got 85 million people who are uninsured or underinsured. You got 45 million people who are paying off student debt. Hundreds of thousands of bright young kids who can't even afford to go to college. That's America today for working families. But there is another America out there where we have more income and wealth inequality today than we have ever had in the history of America. You got 3 people, one of whom is a neighbor of yours, who has raised very substantially the medium wealth index here in Austin. But you got 3 people who now own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Can you believe that? You got 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%. That may be happening. And I want to tell you something else. When I was a kid growing up, it's no great secret. CEOs always made more money than workers. That's always been the case. When I was growing up, the ratio was about 20 to 1. CEO made 20 times more than a worker. Anybody know what the ratio is today? 400 times. You got these multi-billionaires who own mansions all over the world. They fly around and they have big jets. They own these gargantuan yachts. Some guy just bought an island someplace. Some of them have so much money, they're building spaceships going off to Mars. And meanwhile, the average American is struggling to put food on the table. We are right now in an unprecedented moment in American history for a lot of reasons. You know them all. Greg went through some of them. And that is why this is an unprecedented election. On one hand, you got a party that is trying to deny women the right to control their own bodies. We will not allow them to get away with that. You got a party where, when the scientists are telling us that if we don't get a handle on climate change, the planet and the nation we're going to be leaving our kids and future generations will become increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. You are beginning to see that right here in Texas with the drought, and that's going on all over the world. And what is the Republican response? They turn their back. At best, if they even acknowledge the reality of climate change, which some of them don't, they have zero ideas in how to address it. And then on top of all of that, this election, and as a United States Senator, honest to God, I never thought I would have to say this. This is not an election about your views on education. You know, Lloyd will tell you that's not your views on prescription drugs, on healthcare. It is a question of whether or not we remain a democracy. And today we say to the Republicans, too many people, brave men and women from Texas, Vermont, and all over this country, fought and died for American democracy, and we're not going to let right-wing extremists take that away. But this election is about even more than that. This election is about whether or not we create a government and an economy that works for all or just the very rich. And let me give you an example of what I mean. At a time when we have unprecedented income and wealth inequality, the Republicans want to repeal the estate tax, which is a tax that applies only to the top 1/10 of 1%. Lloyd, am I right? That's what they want to do. If they do that, and remember, these are the guys, you see them on TV every night. Oh, we are deeply concerned about the deficit and the national debt. It's all Lloyd Doggett's fault, Bernie Sanders' fault. If they repeal the estate tax, you're going to add $1.75 trillion to the national debt. And all of those benefits, all of them, will go to the top 1/10 of 1%. Musk's family alone will get a $80 billion tax break. One family, $80 billion tax break. And in order to pay for it, they have another brilliant idea, and that is they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I say to all those folks out there who are thinking about voting Republican, think about a party that wants to give massive tax breaks to the top 1/10 of 1% and pay for that by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those are not priorities for Texas, for Vermont, or for America. And I want to say another word. We don't talk about it enough. I want to say another word. Republicans say, oh, this is about inflation. You know, Joe Biden and Lloyd Doggett and Bernie Sanders, we caused inflation in America. Well, I will shock you to tell you that they're lying. Tell you two things. Number one is all of you know, and I hope everybody in Texas understands, inflation, sadly enough, is a global phenomenon. It's not just an American issue. Inflation here is 8%, much too high. It is hurting people. No ifs, buts, and maybes. In the United Kingdom, it's 10%. In Europe, it is 11%. Well, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders didn't cause inflation in Europe and the United Kingdom. What has caused inflation all over the world are several factors. Number one, as a result of this terrible pandemic, there has been a breakdown in the supply chains, and that's caused part of the problem. Number two, this horrendous war in the Ukraine has caused part of the problem. Well, let me tell you something that you don't see much on corporate media. As another reason, in fact, the major reason for inflation in this country. And that has everything to do with corporate greed. And I want everybody to hear this. At a time when gas prices have soared all over this country, Exxon, Mobil, Conoco, Phillips, and the other major oil companies are enjoying record-breaking profits. At a time when people can't afford, elderly people, others, can't afford the groceries they need, the profits of the major food companies have soared. The major drug companies have seen a 90% increase in their profits over the last year. So what you got, and really think about the moral implications of this. You got the pandemic, you got this terrible war in the Ukraine, you got all of the problems facing working families in America, and corporate America, instead of saying, well, what can we do to take the burden off of working families who are struggling right now? How do we keep prices low? What they have said is, in the midst of all of this confusion and turmoil, now is the moment to raise prices as high as we possibly can. That is outrageous. And that is why I am going to lead the effort to make sure we have a windfall profit tax on these greedy bastards. And last point I want to make, and Greg made it as well. What we have got to do is not only do everything we can to elect progressives and Democrats in the next 2 weeks, we've got to do more than that. We have got to, in our own hearts, understand that 99% is a lot larger number than 1%. And that means that we cannot allow Republican right-wing people to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation. It means that we bring, and I know that's what the trade union movement has always been about, that's what the extraordinary concept of solidarity is about. The understanding you can't do it alone, you can't do it alone, you can't do it alone. We make progress when we all stand together. And when we all stand together and take on the greed of the billionaire class, yes, we can guarantee health care to all people as a human right through a Medicare for All single-payer program. Yes, we can raise the minimum wage to a living wage, and congratulations for that $20 an hour minimum wage here. Yes, we can make it possible for all of our kids to get a higher education because we make public colleges and universities tuition free. And yes, the United States can lead the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy and save the planet for future generations. So, brothers and sisters, this is a pivotal moment in American history. And now is the time for us to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, all over this country. There are a lot more of us than them. And let us go forward and create the kind of nation that you and I know we can become. Thank you all very much.